it's Kate. Welcome back to my channel, and today is the day that I'm going to be telling you something really important. So the main reason for my channel is because of the fact that during the beginning of this year, so the beginning of 2019 and the end of 2018, I was diagnosed with a reoccurred cancer, and I decided that I wanted to create something to help other children all around the world, to kind of help them realize that they're not alone and that they're not different and that there are people out there. Because I don't know that much, but there aren't a lot of YouTubers that I've seen that have gone through what us cancer survivors have and don't really understand it from the actual victim's perspective. And so today is actually the day that I'm going to be telling all of you the two cancer experiences I have gone through, all before I was 18 years old, to try and not only to explain and share my experiences, but also to help explain aspects of what can happen to someone who is going through cancer, whether it be a family member or a friend. But before we start, I would like to just quickly say something. There are some big words in this video that I might say incorrectly, and I will put them up on the screen, but I apologize if that happens. I apologize if I get any terminology wrong. Also, I'd like to also quickly say a disclaimer that there will be some pictures in this video that may be a little not bloody and not disturbing, but messy, because while in hospital I found it really difficult to actually wash my hair, which was the surgical site. And I will have pictures from parts of my experience, and there might be some blood, so just a disclaimer: if you are squeamish, or if you don't like looking at stuff like that, but you still want to watch the video, maybe I'll put a little, I don't know, I'll put something here to show a little symbol in a different color to kind of warn you a little before the image arrives, so that you guys can be prepared. But hopefully this video can help everyone understand more and in understanding the experience. Also, I'd like to just say everyone's cancer experience is different. There may be some people that have had similarities to mine, but everyone is different, so don't just assume that we're all going through the same thing, because that's not true. This is just me explaining my story and what I've gone through. And if you can relate, that's cool, but also I'm not trying to make it seem like this is the only cancer, because that's incorrect. There are over 100 different cancers, so this is just one out of many. So I've had cancer twice in my life so far. Hopefully never ever again, because it is a horrible experience. But my cancer, luckily, were both the exact same ones. So mine was known as an anaplastic ependymoma, which basically, from the stuff I could find, was just a form of cancer that grows really quickly in roughly circular shapes. Mine came from the spinal fluid in my back, but it was created in my brain, which is not a very nice place. But anyway, when I was 6 years old, going through my first cancer experience, I had the operation to remove it, because at that time they didn't have other ways of dealing with cancer. So this was back when the medical field of cancer hadn't really expanded as much as it has now. And so I went into hospital and I got the operation done. They removed the cancer. It was 3 centimeters in size, which, if you picture that in the child's skull of a 6-year-old, that's pretty big. 2 hours after the operation, I woke up. I spent a couple more days in hospital and I went home. It was a very well done procedure that had no complications, which I was very grateful for at the time. So no complications, no infections, which were a high risk because of the fact that my cancer was on my head, and so even though they shaved off part of my hair where they were going to be doing the operation, there was still a risk that because of the hair follicles there could be an infection, which is not great for open wounds. So thankfully I didn't have an infection when I was 6 years old. During the first cancer I was still attending school. I was at primary school, and I was having to go through a form of treatment known as radiation therapy. And I would have my treatment in the morning, go to school in the afternoon, and we did that for every day of the week, and some weekends depending whether there's like a public holiday on the week or something, but it was very like scheduled, and they would basically have my treatment and then I'd go back to school. And so I was getting really tired as a side effect, which is a well-known side effect for radiation. You get really tired. And so the teacher that I had at the time brought a couch into the classroom, and she'd let me sleep on the couch for the afternoon whenever I needed it, which was really sweet of her. Thank you so much. So my treatment lasted for 6.5 weeks roughly. And over that time I was exposed to 59 grays, which is the term used to say how much radiation you were given. So over the 6.5 weeks I was exposed to 59 gamma rays, or not gamma rays, I was 59 bursts of radiation roughly, which is a very high dose, and if I was given that all at once, it was extremely lethal. So that's why they would space it out over the amount of time. Don't worry, I will go into more information about radiation in another video, but I just wanted to focus on the cancer story for this one. After the first cancer, due to the radiation treatment, at the time, so this is early 2000s, the way they did radiation wasn't as targeted as it is today, and now it's a lot more targeted. It doesn't affect places that don't need the radiation. But when I first went through radiation, it was a very large area that they were basically lasering, and due to that they damaged a part of my brain known as the pituitary, or the pituitary, something like that, very similar, and it's basically the center part of the brain. It's a very important part of the brain, and the radiation killed it. So I had to have medication to try and like make that part of the brain work. I had to take 2 oral medications, and the first one is thyroxine, which I actually can't show you guys because it's actually in the fridge downstairs, because you have to keep it cold. That's one of the medications that must be cold, and that's for the, don't know which part, but it is one that I have to take once a day, 100 milligrams I'm pretty sure, but I might be wrong. If not, I'll put the correct writings up here. And the other one I have to take is this. This is my trusty friend, hydrocortisone. This is a tablet that I have 3 times a day, and depending whether, if I'm sick, like I have a cold, I'll up the dose, but if not, then I'm meant to have 1.5, 3 times a day. So with the 2 medications that I'm taking, the thyroxine and the hydrocortisone both work with the pituitary situation, but the thyroxine kind of focuses more on the thyroid deficiency that I now have due to the treatment, and the hydrocortisone works for my adrenal function issues. But they both are working with the pituitary most of the time. They would just have 2 different areas that they actually work with. So the doctors were always like, due to previous records and everything, if you don't get a reoccurred cancer by the age of your 16th birthday, it's likely to never come back again. Like, it was only a 0.5% chance that it would come back again. Me being me, I love to just throw a spanner in the works, And when I was 17, I was going through my VCE exams, which are the final exams you do in high school before you graduate here in Australia. I was getting numbness all down the right side of my body, and I just thought it was me not getting enough exercise, or me just stressing out due to the exam period. But then I was doing my music exam, because all the way through high school and primary school I was singing, I was performing, and due to that I had been able to train a talent known as sight singing, whereas they give you a starting note sometimes, or even if you pick out the note from air if you're perfect pitched, but they would give you a note and you'd have a piece of sheet music in front of you, and you'd have to, from that one note, you'd have to sing the whole thing correctly. And in the performance exam, entry exam basically, to get into a university I wanted to get into, that was what we had to do. And I came out and I said to my dad, who was there at the time, and I said, I stuffed up the sight singing, I couldn't do it. And automatically red flags were going off for both of us, because I've never not been able to sight sing. I've always been able to do it, whether I was sick or whether I was well. Like every time I'd be fine. And so the next day I woke up, I was getting my breakfast, and the smell of the food made me physically sick, and I started vomiting. And I have to have medication, and because I was throwing up, I couldn't keep the medication down. And so we went to the hospital. We told them everything that had been happening, including the numbness all down the side, and they were like, we're going to give you an MRI. And an MRI is basically a machine that they use. It's like there's multiple types. There's what I like to call the donut MRI, and then there's the camera MRI. The donut one is literally a donut, and you go through the center of the donut and it scans how much of the body they need to scan. And then the camera one is basically the same, except it's not a donut shape, it's physically a camera shape. But it still has the circle in the middle, like the lens of the camera that you would go through and scan. And so they would always do MRIs with me to make sure the cancer wasn't coming back, and I would have one once a year at that time. And so they had taken we had done the MRI, and I had gone back to the emergency room that I was in, and the doctor came in. He's like, it's a recurred cancer, it's back where it was beforehand, we're going to have to operate. And having been told there was a 0.5% chance of the cancer returning, I was devastated. I was thinking, like, I will go to university, I'll meet new friends, I'll get to travel the world, I'll get to do so many cool stuff, and now I feel like I've gone backwards in that. So for this cancer, they were very quick. So it was if I remember correctly, it was the 5th of December that I went into hospital, and when they found out about the cancer coming back, they sent me up to the children's ward at Monash Children's Hospital here in Melbourne, Australia. Because I was 17 at the time, I was not an adult yet. And so I was there on the ward, and I had a few really good friends come and visit me, which I'm so grateful for. And hopefully I'll have them on this channel, because like they definitely were the part that kept me going throughout all of this. But so I was there on the 5th, and I waited 5 days. On the 10th was when I went and had the operation. And it was daunting when I was about to go in, because you're basically put in like not a scrub, but like it is a scrub, isn't it? Well, I don't know, an operation gown, we'll call it that. They had some of the surgeons come out, and they shaved the part of my head that they were going to operate, and then I think that was when they also started giving me the gas to make me fall asleep, because we're not awake for these operations, we are asleep. And I remember I had full trust in my doctors. I still have full trust in my doctors, because I've gone through this before, I knew what was going to happen, I was prepared. And then I go to sleep and I don't remember anything. Nothing at all, nothing. When I wake up, or when I woke up, that's the correct way of saying this, it's basically, the way I would describe waking up from an operation is like when you're really jet lagged and you fall asleep and then you have to wake up again to like eat or something. I don't know, like the first dose of dealing with jet lag, basically. If you're not used to it, you get like that groggy, like, oh, I'm so tired, I don't want to wake up, why are you doing this kind of feeling. That's kind of similar to how I felt when I woke up. And at the same time they were waking me up, I could feel them pulling something out of my throat because they had to incubate me for the operation to make sure I was still breathing. And at the time, it was very weird. I was in the ICU, so the children's ICU, and I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go to the bathroom, and I wasn't hungry because I was connected to one of those the drip machines. If I remember, I don't know what they're called, but I was calling the drip machines, and it was connected into my arm, and that was basically feeding me food through the liquid in there, but I did try to eat some physical food. And so I woke up on the 14th, but I didn't realize that at the time. I was very unaware that I woke up on the 14th. I only found that out recently, that because there's a time difference. I went in operation on the 10th. They don't operate for 4 days straight. That's not how it works. And so recently I've been very confused trying to figure it out. And I was in a coma, it turned out. The operation had some ups and downs. I apparently suffered a stroke during the operation, and I was extremely close to death during the operation as well. And so to make sure that nothing happened to me, they had put me in an induced coma for 4 days. And I was connected to every single machine. So I had a breathing machine, a feeding machine, a bathroom machine, I don't know what they're called, but and so I had machines doing everything for me. And after the 2 days, they took me off the breathing machine, but they kept the tube in my mouth, because once you take that out, you can't incubate someone. You can't redo it. So they kept half of it in, basically, to make sure if anything bad happens, they could reconnect me to the machine. And so being told that I was in a coma for 4 days terrifies me, because for the first cancer, like I said before, I woke up 2 hours later. For this cancer, I woke up 4 days after, which kind of shows how bad it was and how severe it was. So the second cancer also has quite a few differences to the first one. Besides being a massive delay in me waking up, the second cancer was also 1 centimeter bigger than the first one, so it was 4 centimeters, which is pretty large still. Eventually, they did move me back to the children's ward, and while I was there, one of the things I had to relearn to do, because since you're in a coma for 4 days, you kind of have to relearn how to do things. One of the things I had to do was relearn how to go to the bathroom. Because while I was in the coma and while I was in the ICU, I was connected to something known as a catheter. I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm not entirely sure. But it's basically a bag connected to your bladder to make sure that you go to the bathroom, and gets rid of all the wee and stuff. And so I had to relearn how to do that, and they can't let you go home until you learn how to go to the bathroom. So, which is really difficult when you've had like morphine and other drugs, because the more drugs you have, you actually get constipated and it gets harder to go to the bathroom. So I had to relearn how to do all of that. But eventually I relearned how to do that. I was still a little wobbly on my legs, like I struggled walking a little bit, and I couldn't use my right hand at all. So I had to relearn how to do that as well. But eventually I did go home, and I managed to be able to go home on the 24th of December, so Christmas Eve I was going home. But then we ran into an issue. I had been home a couple days, a couple weeks maybe, and my mum would clean the surgical site because we were told, oh, you should try clean it and stuff and make sure it doesn't get infected. But it was always like oozing yellow pussy stuff, and we weren't sure what it was at first. But on the 5th of January, my head was in a lot of pain. It was sore, it was painful, and I was like, I hate this, I hate this. I need to go back to hospital, something's wrong. I felt like something was wrong, and my parents were worried, so they took me back in, and they took me back to the children's ward, and one of the neurosurgeons came and saw me, and she took one look and she's like, I'm not happy with it. I am not happy with it. And so the next day I had another operation, and it turned out the site was infected, which is really bad, especially since it's on the brain and the skull. So on the 6th of January, I had the operation, and the doctors cleaned the site, and they also had to remove part of my skull because the skull bone actually had gotten infected. And if we hadn't taken the bone out, it could have spread to the rest of my body, which is not what we wanted. But I'm not sure what the name of my infection was. I think it was a form of staph, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll put the name of it somewhere on the screen. Due to the severity of the infection, when I had come out of the operation, I don't know when I woke up for that one, but it wasn't, I think it was the same day. I was also connected to another drip. It was connected to the antibacterial liquid that the doctors were using to make sure there was nothing of the infection left. And so they would come and give this to me, I'm not sure how many times a day, but it was quite a few times, and it would also happen at nighttime. But the nurses would come in, they'd hook the bag onto the machine, connect it to everything, connect the thing to the head of the needle that was still sticking out, and they could connect it to, and it would administer the antibacterial liquid into my system. And it was painful. It was so painful, and I think it was because of how severe the infection was, made the more severe the infection, the more painful the liquid, because it's like stronger. But I remember I'm someone who I don't tell people when I'm in pain. I'm very, very guarded in that sense. And so I think throughout the whole experience, like, I never really said I was sore, I never said I was hurting, but while I was having the antibacterial liquid put into me, my mum would come and massage my wrist and my hand to try and calm the pain. But I would silently cry because it was so painful. I couldn't stop the fact that I was crying. And eventually, they can't let you take the drip home. Like, doctors don't allow that. So what they did was they made me get a Baxter bottle. And Baxter became my best friend. I took him everywhere I did the next month. And basically what the Baxter bottle is a vacuum with inside a little bottle, kind of like a baby's bottle, and it will be connected to a long tube, and this long tube would go into your body. And mine, if you kind of might be able to see it, is a tiny, I'll come closer, right there, and that is where the tiny dot was, where my Baxter bottle connected into my arm. And so the way they did it, they put general anesthetic or local anesthetic into the site, which is painful. I don't like local anesthetic, it is too painful. So they put that in my arm, and then they, because they have to make sure it's high up in your arm, because the higher the arm, the bigger the veins. And they wanted to make sure that this tube could go in properly. And so they would start putting this long tube. It's a very movable, noodle-like plastic tube that would go into my arm, and they used x-ray photos to make sure it was going the right path, and it ended up going from all the way here all the way up and just above my heart, because if it went to the heart it could go to the entire body. So that was the main plan. And so every morning a nurse would come and make sure, because the Baxter bottle runs out after 24 hours, and they always have to give you a new one and a new one and a new one. And so for the whole month that was what was happening, and I was connected to this bottle. For my birthday I was connected to the bottle, and it was a very interesting experience. If I have pictures from my birthday, you can actually see where it's attached to my arm, because it had the plastic attachment, but then it was also wrapped in a bandage. And Baxter and I parted on the, when did we part? 7th? No, 19th? The 19th, I'm pretty sure. I think it was the 19th, because it was right before one of my friend's birthdays, and I was so happy because I was like, yes, I can go to his birthday party and not be worried about bumping into anything. But definitely I haven't had any infection since, so Baxter did his job. Proud of you. But when they removed it, you don't feel anything when they remove it, which I thought I would, but you literally do not feel anything, which is really great. The only painful part is when they actually put it in, because of the local anesthetic. But they really, when they pulled it out, it was huge. Like, it was bigger than the amount the screen will give me. But mine was like a deep purple one, and it kind of looked like a worm, to be honest. So when the cancer came back, doctors really didn't know what to do. They were very unsure, because my cancer came back after 11 years. That's never happened. It's always come back earlier for other people. And so when they were trying to figure out what they should do with it, they had no idea what they should do, because there was no documentation on what to do. So I have now become the only one in the world with my situation, and they're going to have to try and come up with solutions, because if it's happened to me, undoubtedly and quite sadly, it might happen to somebody else. And so hopefully through me, doctors will be able to figure out other ways of treating return cancers, which would be really helpful for everybody else. So after the cancer came back, the treatment I went through was almost the exact same. I had the 59 grays of radiation again, but this time, since it was a recurred cancer, I also had another form of treatment known as chemotherapy. Yay, chemo! For those who don't know, chemo is a poison, basically, and I had mine orally, so I would have tablets, and I'd have them for a week, like 5 days. And in those 5 days, I would be unable to eat. I would be throwing up bile, whatever. But I would be bedridden. I wouldn't be able to move. I'd be so weak. And because originally they wouldn't put you on chemo unless it was really bad, and since it was a reoccurred cancer, it obviously, the doctors thought they had missed something the first time. It was like another form of killing off what would be left. And also the cool thing was that the chemo I was taking also corresponded with the radiation treatment, and so they would work together in killing off what was left, which was really cool to think about, but still not fun. And I finished chemotherapy on the 2nd of May. That was roughly when we finished radiation as well, was the 2nd of May. You're meant to have 5 rounds of chemo. I only had 4 because that was when I ended my radiation. And everything seems to be going fine, so, and I'm still feeling the side effects. Because with radiation, not only will the site be burned, basically, because it's lasers, so my head is quite sore and stings a little bit, and it's also irritated, and it like balloons up, like blows up like a balloon a little bit due to the radiation. And I'm also extremely tired still from the radiation. I'm someone who can't sleep during the day. So unlike the first cancer where I got to sleep in the afternoons, I think because I've gotten so used to being jet lagged and I've spent so many sleepless nights studying for high school and trying to get projects done because teachers don't understand that we all have lives, and like deadlines that I have to meet even though I have like 3 deadlines on the same day, like teachers, what the hell. I don't really get tired and I don't find the need to sleep, and I can't sleep during the day. I can only sleep at nighttime when it's pitch black and complete silence. And so I'd be spending a lot of days just lying down watching movies or TV shows or watching YouTube on my computer. I wouldn't go out because I just, even though I couldn't sleep, I was still really tired and I still really was like, ugh, really must I do something? So I would say those are the only difference in treatment wise. But yeah, it's basically all that's really different was that. So anyway, that was the 2 cancer experiences that I have gone through. And my hair is growing back, which doctors were surprised about. They were like, your hair probably won't grow back this time. But it is making its return. It is still growing back, which is really amazing. What else? There will be a video in the future where I go into more detail about the radiation therapy and the chemotherapy, so I'm only just dusting the surface with them for this video, but there will be one in the future where I actually will go into more detail and I will show you what we had to wear for the treatment and stuff like that, which is actually really cool. And that was basically it. I hope this opened up a view of what people can go through, and things that can go wrong, but how doctors can help you through it and everything. And I'll see you guys in the next video. If you guys have any comments or questions about the whole treatment, don't be afraid to write down in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you, because I'm completely open with any questions anybody has, because it is a confusing topic, so don't worry about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!